Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. Where were you at 11:34 p.m. Eastern time when the next great realignment move in all of college sports dropped like a bombshell on Twitter? I am, of course, talking about Wednesday night. We got the news. The new look Pac-12, which as of right now has just two teams. It is no longer a two-team league, baby. That is right. Oregon State and Washington State, they've got friends at the table, because Ross Dellinger was the first one to report it. And by about 9 a.m. Eastern time on Thursday, it was official. The Pac-12 went from a two-pack to a six-pack, baby. That is right. Two-pack to six-pack, as Boise State, San Diego State, Colorado State, and Fresno State are joining the league here in a few years. And so, listen, I know there's a lot of shows that have reacted to it. I'm not really going to hit on this because I will say I do think it's interesting, and I do want to very quickly give credit to Oregon State and Washington State, because I think they made a very smart strategic move, demanding and basically saying, if you all abandon us, that's fine, but we're keeping that Pac-12 logo, branding, whatever. Because what ended up happening was the Pac-12 was still owed a lot of money from NCAA tournaments in the past, from college football playoffs. Remember, Washington made the national championship game a year ago. And so those other schools thought, oh, we're going to leave, but we're going to get a check on the way out. And Washington State and Oregon State said, no, we're still the Pac-12. They keep the branding. That, by the way, is what has allowed them to add some of these teams. But at the same time, let me also say this. There's an old saying in life, can't put lipstick on a pig. I believe that is the saying. And when I look at the news of the Pac-12, adding 4 teams from the Mountain West, I'll just be transparent. It feels like lipstick on a pig. Boise State, San Diego State, Colorado State, Fresno State. Congrats to you guys. You're moving on up in the world just a little bit. But at the end of the day, this is just basically the Mountain West with 2 new teams, Oregon State and Washington State. They're calling it the Pac-12. Doesn't change the fact that it is not the Pac-12. There's no UCLA, there's no USC, there's no Oregon, there's no Arizona. I hate to say it, but I was thinking about Bill Walton on Monday morning. What would he have thought about all this? You know, no longer with us, obviously, but it's crazy. But I just, it's hard for me to get excited because it doesn't really change anything. It's just the Mountain West with 2 new schools. It doesn't change the format of the postseason, doesn't change the format of anything. And so it got me thinking. I could do 10 minutes on what does it mean? It doesn't mean anything. And so instead, what I want to do is kind of switch gears and do something different, because I was thinking, this is just lipstick on a pig. But what are the realignment moves that actually, in the grand scheme of things, could matter? What are the realignment moves that actually would impact college sports on a granular level? Because at this point, the SEC is pretty much set, the Big Ten is pretty much set, and everyone's just moving around the deck chairs to try and have some sort of seat at the table. And it struck me, there's really only 2 big moves left. It's whenever the ACC breaks up, what happens to the 3, 4, 5 teams that everybody wants. And then, of course, what is the future of Notre Dame football? And I say that respectfully to my alma mater, UConn. Say it respectfully to Gonzaga. Say it respectfully to some of these other schools moving in different places. The only moves that shake college sports to the core and get us to this finish line of whatever college sports is going to look like in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years is those 2 moves. The ACC, I'll be honest, is absolutely fascinating to me, and I'll tell you why. It's because we have talked about it time and again. We don't need to get into all the politics of it, but the ACC has a TV contract that is set through 2036, okay? 12 more years tying those 2 schools together. And I've said it a million times, is that when I look at that grant of rights for the ACC, just transparently, everybody signed it, and it feels like something that it's going to be hard to get out of because it's what everybody wanted in the moment that it's signed. But if you ask people in the college sports industry, I'll also be transparent with you. People think this thing is going to fall apart. People think that the schools that want out of this contract are going to be able to get out of it. And people think it's going to happen sooner rather than later. There are high-profile people in college sports that I know of that believe that within the next year, teams will be able to get out of this deal from the ACC, and then we get another wave of absolute chaos in college sports. What'll be interesting, by the way, and we don't have to spend too much time on this, is what actually happens with everybody. Because I think there's this notion like Florida State, Clemson, where are they going? What does it all mean? Blah, blah, blah. Couple things. One, everyone you talk to in the space, North Carolina is actually the most coveted priority of any of these schools, okay? North Carolina, probably Virginia. They're great academic schools, which appeals to the Big Ten. You know, all the tweed jacket wearing school presidents at Wisconsin and Northwestern and Michigan that want to rub elbows with other, smart intellectual, whatever. They're intrigued by North Carolina. They're intrigued by Virginia. And then the SEC, of course, those are two bordering states to the SEC footprint that Greg Sankey would like to add. I don't even think he's been quiet about that. I think he's whatever. Obviously, it would be fascinating to see what happens with Clemson and Florida State. Listen, it's easy for these conferences, the Big Ten and the SEC, to say, oh, no, we have no interest. Let's see what happens if those two are actually available. Now, the knock on them is that from an academic perspective, they're not as good as Carolina. They're not as good as Virginia. Does that limit interest in the Big Ten? And then from the SEC already has a footprint, already has somebody in North Carolina or in South Carolina with South Carolina and in Florida with the University of Florida. And so the question becomes, would Florida State and Clemson actually add anything to the situation for the SEC? So those two are very interesting from that perspective. I don't know that the landing spot will be as soft as people think. It's, by the way, why the Big 12 believes that they have a shot to land Florida State and Clemson, because those would actually be a real priority and upgrade for them. But I'm also curious what would happen with everybody else, because this Oregon State, Washington State situation that we all lived through and we all felt bad for those two schools, whenever the ACC breaks up, I think there's a lot more schools that end up without a chair at the big boy table than people realize, and a lot more schools that end up without a chair than schools that do end up with a chair. Carolina is going to be fine. Clemson, Florida State, probably Duke because of basketball and the academic standing is going to be fine. But Boston College, I don't know. Wake Forest, I don't know. Pitt, I don't know. Syracuse, I don't know. So I'm just bringing all this up to just say that's the big chess piece in realignment. It's not Washington State and Oregon State. It's to see, it's to kind of just see what would happen with those schools as well, because I think that there is a good chance that it could get ugly for a lot of those ACC schools. Really quickly, should mention, by the way, the other big chess piece is obviously Notre Dame, right? Notre Dame at some point is going to join a conference, and by the way, the second the ACC breaks up, they're almost screwed because they have this alliance with the ACC that has them playing 6-7 ACC schools a year. You start looking at their schedules in the future, it's very ACC heavy. I mean, you can look at the schedule this year. I mean, outside of Northern Illinois, who they just played, all of a sudden Notre Dame's got problems with them. Look at the schedule. Final couple weeks of the year versus, Louisville at home, Stanford, which remember is an ACC team now at home, Georgia Tech on a neutral field, Florida State, Virginia. I mean, that's what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 right there, right on the schedule. So if the ACC breaks up, that scheduling alliance falls apart. And I think the bigger question is, I don't really understand what incentive the Big Ten and the SEC really has to schedule Notre Dame going forward. So it's just an interesting thought. We don't need to spend too much time on it. But to me, those are the two real domino pieces in realignment that matter. What happens to Florida State? What happens to Clemson? What happens to the ACC in general? And when does Notre Dame join a conference? Those are the ones that matter. Don't be fooled. Listen, a couple things. Don't be fooled. Washington State, Oregon State added 4 teams to the Pac-12. Again, we can call it the 6-pack now. But once you get past those teams, they're going to add more. I would have to assume UNLV will get an invite at some point, whatever. And then the Mountain West will backfill with other schools, but it doesn't matter. Just keep an eye on the ACC. Keep an eye on Notre Dame. Those are the ones that matter.